5 signs you're spending too much to feel happy. Alright, let's dive into one of the most important questions you'll ask yourself in today's world. Am I spending too much to feel happy? Now, I know what you're thinking. Spending has become such a normal part of our lives that we rarely stop to question why we do it. But today we're going to slow down and ask those deep, reflective questions that most people avoid. We're going to explore 5 signs that you might be chasing happiness through spending, and trust me, this journey is going to get philosophical. First, let's set the stage with a simple yet profound question: why do we spend money? On the surface, it seems obvious: food, shelter, comfort. But when we look closer, we start to see a pattern emerging. We spend not just to meet our needs, but to fill a void, to chase a feeling, to escape something deeper. And here's the real question: is spending actually making us happier, or is it just a temporary fix that leaves us wanting more? Let's start with sign 1. You're buying things to reward yourself constantly. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, "I deserve this after a long day or a stressful week"? We've all been there. It feels good at the moment, right? You get that dopamine hit when the delivery arrives or when you walk out of the store with a shiny new purchase. But here's the deeper question to consider. Are you rewarding yourself because you've actually achieved something meaningful? Or are you using spending as a way to escape feelings of inadequacy or boredom? This is where it gets philosophical. Aristotle, one of the great ancient thinkers, believed that happiness comes from living a life of virtue, doing what is right, and fulfilling your potential as a human being. But when we constantly reward ourselves with material things, are we really living virtuously, or are we indulging in temporary pleasures that distract us from what really matters? Ask yourself, am I spending money to feel good in the moment, or to create lasting value in my life? Now, let's move on to the second sign. You're chasing the latest trends and gadgets. We live in a consumer-driven world where the next big thing is always just around the corner. New phone models, fashion trends, tech gadgets. There's always something newer, faster, and flashier. But here's the problem: when you're constantly chasing after the next trend, you're trapped in a cycle of never-ending desire. And here's the philosophical kicker: is desire itself the problem? Buddhist philosophy teaches us that desire is a root cause of suffering. When we constantly want more stuff, more recognition, more luxury, we're never truly satisfied. There's always something else to crave. So, ask yourself, is your happiness tied to owning the latest and greatest, or can you find contentment in what you already have?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
This brings us to the third sign. You're using spending to boost your self-esteem. This one hits deep. We've all had moments where we feel insecure or less than others. And what's one of the easiest ways to feel better about ourselves? Buying something that makes us feel more successful, more attractive, or more worthy, whether it's designer clothes, a flashy car, or the latest tech accessory. We often spend money to project an image of success or confidence. But here's the question we need to ask: is this real happiness, or is it just a mask? Think about it. When your self-worth is tied to what you own, you're building happiness on a foundation that can easily crumble. What happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when you realize that there's always someone with more stuff, better stuff? True self-esteem comes from within, not from the things we own. As the philosopher Epictetus, a Stoic, once said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. So, are you spending to fill an internal void that can't be satisfied externally? Now, let's talk about the fourth sign. You associate spending with social validation. This one is huge, especially in the age of social media. How often do we buy things not because we need them, or even truly want them, but because they'll look good on Instagram. Whether it's the vacation photos, the trendy outfits, or the fancy dinners, we often spend money to gain approval from others. But here's the deep question: are you living for yourself or for the validation of others? Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, spoke about the crowd and how easily we lose ourselves trying to conform to what others expect of us. When we spend to gain social approval, we're not living authentically, we're living for the crowd. And here's the philosophical truth: happiness that depends on external validation is fragile. It can vanish in an instant when the likes stop rolling in, or when someone else outshines you. So, ask yourself, are you spending money to create memories for yourself, or to impress a world that barely notices? Finally, we arrive at the fifth sign: you feel guilty after spending. This is perhaps the most telling sign. If you're constantly feeling guilt or regret after making purchases, it's a clear indicator that something is out of balance. But here's where we go deeper: what is that guilt really telling you? In many ways, guilt is like a philosophical alarm bell. It's your mind's way of signaling that your actions aren't aligned with your deeper values. Maybe you're overspending because you're trying to keep up with societal pressures, or maybe you're using money to avoid facing something uncomfortable in your life. Either way, guilt is a sign that your spending habits are not contributing to your happiness. The illusion of happiness: why spending more won't fix what's missing inside. Let's continue by exploring the heart of the issue. Why do we believe that spending more will make us happier in the first place? It's a powerful illusion, one that's been fed to us by advertising, social media, and even our own psychological desires. But here's the harsh truth: spending money can never truly fix what's missing inside. It might distract us for a while, but it never fills the void. Here's an important question to reflect on: are we confusing temporary pleasure with lasting happiness? Think about the last time you bought something you really wanted. Maybe it was a new phone, a designer piece of clothing, or even a fancy meal at a restaurant. In the moment, it felt good, maybe even great. But how long did that feeling last? A day? A week? And then what? Often, the excitement fades, and we're left right where we started, still searching for that elusive feeling of happiness. This is where we need to probe deeper. Why are we so quick to reach for our wallets when we feel unhappy? Part of the answer lies in the way consumer culture has conditioned us. We've been trained to believe that happiness is something we can buy, that the next purchase will finally make us feel fulfilled. But here's the philosophical paradox: the more we chase happiness through spending, the further it slips away. Let's bring in the wisdom of the ancient Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, who believed that true contentment comes from within. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." This is a radical idea in today's world. We're taught that happiness is something external, something we can acquire if we just work hard enough, earn enough, or spend enough. But according to Stoic philosophy, happiness is internal. It's about cultivating a mindset of gratitude, resilience, and self-sufficiency. So here's the deeper question: if happiness is truly an inside job, why do we keep looking for it outside of ourselves? Now, I'm not saying that all spending is bad. There's nothing wrong with enjoying life's pleasures, buying things that make our lives easier, more comfortable, or even more fun. But the problem arises when we start relying on spending as our primary source of happiness. That's when we fall into the trap of hedonic adaptation, the tendency to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness after experiencing something new. The thrill of a new purchase fades, and we're left wanting more, and more, and more. It's a never-ending cycle. Here's where the real insight comes in: the more we invest in external pleasures, the less we invest in what truly matters: our inner well-being, our relationships, our purpose. These are the things that lead to lasting happiness, not the fleeting high of a purchase. So here's a tough question: are we spending money to avoid doing the inner work needed for true happiness? The philosopher Epicurus had a lot to say about this. He believed that pleasure is important, but not the way we often think. For him, the highest form of pleasure wasn't found in wealth or luxury, but in simple things: friendship, meaningful conversations, and the absence of pain or anxiety. So, let's ask ourselves what would happen if we shifted our focus away from spending on material things and started investing in experiences that nourish our souls. This brings us to an important realization: happiness doesn't come from the things we own, but from the way we live our lives. It's about how we show up for ourselves and others, how we engage with the world, and how we find meaning in the everyday. Spending might provide a temporary escape from discomfort, but it's not a solution. In fact, it often distracts us from the real work of finding contentment within. So, here's the takeaway: if you're spending too much to feel happy, it's not because you're lacking something externally, it's because you're avoiding something internally. And until we confront that, no amount of spending will ever be enough. The emotional cost of spending: how buying happiness can leave you feeling empty. Now that we've uncovered how spending can never truly fill the internal void, let's take a closer look at the emotional toll this cycle can take on us. What is the emotional cost of constantly trying to buy happiness? It's subtle, but over time, spending can lead to feelings of emptiness, anxiety, and even guilt. And yet, many of us don't recognize these emotions for what they are. We just keep swiping the card, hoping the next purchase will make everything feel better. Let's start by examining the concept of emotional debt. We often think of debt in financial terms, but there's also an emotional debt that accumulates with each purchase we make in pursuit of happiness. Each time we spend money hoping to feel better, whether it's buying clothes, gadgets, or experiences, we're borrowing happiness from the future. We get a quick rush of satisfaction, but it's fleeting. Soon that emotional loan comes due, and we're left with the same feelings of discontent, only now they're compounded by the guilt or anxiety of having spent money on something that didn't bring lasting joy. Ask yourself, have you ever bought something, felt great for a moment, and then immediately regretted it? That's emotional debt in action. It's the realization that the happiness you were chasing wasn't genuine, it was a temporary distraction from deeper issues. And often, instead of addressing those issues, we double down on spending, thinking that this time it'll be different. But it never is it? This brings us to a critical point: the pursuit of happiness through spending often leaves us feeling emptier than before. Why? Because the more we rely on external things to make us happy, the more disconnected we become from our inner selves. We start to lose touch with what truly matters: our values, our relationships, and our sense of purpose. We become consumers of things rather than creators of meaning. And here's a thought-provoking question: are we using spending as a way to avoid confronting the deeper questions about our lives? Let's pause and think about intentionality. When we spend mindlessly, we're not really thinking about the deeper impact of our actions. We're reacting to emotions, boredom, stress, insecurity, rather than making conscious decisions about what will truly enhance our lives. But when we bring intentionality into our spending habits, we start to realize that happiness doesn't come from accumulating more stuff. It comes from aligning our actions with our values. So, ask yourself, what if you started spending based on what genuinely matters to you, rather than what you think will make you happy in the moment? Here's the kicker: spending without intention creates a disconnect between who we are and who we think we need to be. We buy things because we believe they'll project a certain image or fill a certain need, but in doing so, we often lose sight of our authentic selves. It's like trying to patch a hole in the roof with decorations instead of fixing the foundation. Sure, it might look nice on the surface, but the underlying problem is still there, waiting to be addressed. So, here's the deeper question: what are you really trying to fix with your spending? And let's not forget about the anxiety that comes with this cycle. We live in a world that's constantly telling us we need to be more successful, more stylish, more adventurous. It's no wonder we feel pressure to spend money in an attempt to keep up. But here's the philosophical paradox: the more we chase happiness through spending, the more anxious we become about whether we're doing enough, owning enough, or being enough. It's a treadmill that never stops, and the faster we run, the further we seem from the finish line. So, here's the big takeaway from this part of our journey: spending can create emotional debt, disconnection, and anxiety that ultimately leaves us feeling empty. The key to breaking this cycle is not to spend more, but to spend less and to spend more thoughtfully. When we stop using money as a way to escape our emotions and start using it as a tool to support our values, we begin to reclaim our happiness from the inside out. Reclaiming happiness: how to break free from spending and find true contentment. As we approach the conclusion of this journey, it's time to talk about how we can break free from the cycle of spending to feel happy and begin to reclaim a deeper, more sustainable sense of contentment. We've explored the emotional traps, the fleeting nature of material pleasure, and the ways in which our spending habits often mask deeper issues. But now comes the most important question: what can we do about it? The first step is to recognize the patterns. Awareness is key. Take a moment to reflect on your spending habits, not just what you're buying, but why you're buying it. Are you spending out of boredom? To fill an emotional void? To gain approval from others? This kind of introspection can be difficult, but it's essential. Ask yourself, what am I really seeking when I make these purchases? Is it happiness, or is it something deeper: connection, purpose, peace of mind? Once we've recognized the patterns, the next step is to shift our mindset from one of consumption to one of intention. Instead of asking, "What can I buy to make myself feel better?" we need to start asking, "What can I do that aligns with my values and brings me lasting fulfillment?" This could mean investing in experiences that create memories rather than objects that collect dust. It could mean focusing on relationships, personal growth, or a hobby that brings genuine joy. The point is, happiness isn't something we can purchase, it's something we build through meaningful action. Another important shift is learning to cultivate gratitude. When we focus on what we already have, rather than what we think we need, we step off the treadmill of constant desire. Gratitude allows us to appreciate the simple, often overlooked pleasures in life, those moments of connection, quiet, and self-reflection that don't come with a price tag. So, here's a question to ponder: how often do we take the time to truly appreciate what we already have, rather than fixating on what's missing? Finally, we need to practice self-compassion. Breaking the habit of spending to feel happy isn't easy. It requires patience and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But remember, this isn't about punishing ourselves, it's about freeing ourselves. By letting go of the idea that happiness is something we can buy, we create space for a deeper, more authentic sense of fulfillment. In the end, true contentment isn't found in what we own, but in how we live. It's about the choices we make, the values we uphold, and the relationships we nurture. When we stop chasing temporary highs and start building a life of meaning, we realize that happiness was never something we had to spend for, it was within us all along.